This is going to be video number 2 in a video series addressing Jesus mythicism, which is the belief that Jesus Christ of Nazareth never existed. In our first video, we talked about the crucifixion of Jesus and how that fact, being so well attested by multiple independent sources, proves Jesus' existence. Today, we're going to look at Paul's letters and see what they have to say. Let's get into it. I want to make 3 preliminary remarks regarding Paul's letters before we get started. It's important to understand that the Bible is a collection of books rather than a single source. Paul wrote 13 individual letters to a variety of churches and individuals, and these letters were eventually circulated as a collection, which is now kept alongside the entire biblical corpus. However, when Paul wrote these letters, there was no single entity called the Bible that he was contributing to. In other words, we're not using the Bible to prove the Bible. Rather, we are referring to 13 individual sources that are now kept within a single book called the Bible. Secondly, scholars unanimously agree that the Apostle Paul was a real historical person. He is mentioned by many independent ancient writers. Some examples include Clement of Rome when he says, "Owing to envy, Paul also obtained the reward of patient endurance, after being 7 times thrown into captivity, compelled to flee, and stoned." Polycarp said, "For neither I nor any other such one can come up to the wisdom of the blessed and glorified Paul. He, when among you, accurately and steadfastly taught the word of truth in the presence of those who were then alive." And Ignatius says, "I do not, as Peter and Paul, issue commandments unto you. They were apostles. I am but a condemned man. They were free, while I am, even until now, a servant." And finally, scholars debate whether or not Paul wrote all 13 of the letters that are traditionally attributed to him that are preserved for us in the Bible. But 4 of his letters are undisputed by almost all of them, and that's where we're going to get our information today. 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Romans, and Galatians. With all of these preliminary remarks out of the way, let's finally get into Paul's claims about Jesus Christ in these 4 undisputed letters. In Romans chapter 1, he tells us that he was born according to the flesh, concerning his son, who was born of a descendant of David, according to the flesh. In Galatians 2, he tells us that he was crucified. "I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. In the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me." In 1 Corinthians 15, we learn that Jesus was resurrected and that he had post-resurrection appearances. We will first look at the resurrection. Verses 14 through 16 say, "Now if Christ is preached that he has been raised from the dead, how do some among you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? But if there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain. Your faith also is in vain." I think it's important to catch that. Paul is saying that if Christ did not rise from the dead, then his own preaching is in vain. And then you have to ask the question, why is he wasting his time writing these letters? It's probably because he believed what he was saying. In verses 5 through 8, we learn about his post-resurrection appearances. It says he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 brothers and sisters at one time, most of whom remain until now, but some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, and to all the apostles. And last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared to me also. Finally, in Galatians 1, we learn that Jesus had followers called apostles, and he had a brother named James. He says, "I went up to Jerusalem to become acquainted with Cephas, Peter, and stayed with him for 15 days. But I did not see another of the apostles except for James, the Lord's brother." Bart Ehrman, when commenting on this passage, concludes, "If Jesus didn't exist, surely his best friend and his brother would know about it." Also, Josephus, a Jewish historian writing around the end of the 1st century, refers to James as the brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ. Paul, who definitely existed, and writing in his 4 undisputed letters that all scholars unanimously agree that he wrote, claims that Jesus was born of the flesh, was crucified, resurrected from the dead, had post-resurrection appearances to his disciples, to his apostles, to 500 people at once, and to himself, and finally that he had a brother named James and followers called apostles. And if you remember from Clement of Rome's claim in his letter, 1 Clement, to the church at Corinth, he says that Paul was imprisoned 7 times and ultimately killed for his claims about Jesus. So let's put all this together into a simple syllogism regarding the existence of Jesus. Premise 1. The Apostle Paul's claims regarding Jesus Christ either refer to a mythological figure or a real historical person. Premise 2. The content of the Apostle Paul's claims makes it very unlikely that he is referring to a mythological figure. The content being that he was born according to the flesh, was crucified, resurrected, had followers, had a brother, and appeared to multiple people alive after his crucifixion. Premise 3. The context of the Apostle Paul's claims make it extremely unlikely that he is lying about the content of his claims. The context being he was continuously imprisoned, he was beaten, and eventually killed for his claims. Premise 4. From 2 and 3, it is extremely unlikely that he is referring to a mythological figure. Conclusion, Paul's claims most plausibly refer to a real historical person. To put it the most simply, the content and the context of the Apostle Paul's claims regarding Jesus Christ makes it highly likely that he's referring to a historical figure and not a mythological person. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want more content like this. This has been The Epitome. I'm your host, Nathan Bozeman. We'll see you around.